Most founders completely crumble the moment investors challenge them, and I've tracked exactly why this happens to 80% of the founders I've worked with. It sounds harsh, but I've seen it happen countless times. But here's the good news. It doesn't have to be you. So in this video, I'm going to show you an easy, safe, and totally game-changing 3-step formula to confidently answer investors' toughest questions, including a real scenario where Keith flipped skepticism into immediate excitement and was able to raise £1.7 million from it. And yes, this is the same system that will make you look forward to tough investor questions instead of dreading them. You ready to change your next investor conversation forever? Let's jump in. Before we jump straight into step 1, let's quickly talk about why investor questions can feel so tough in the first place, and what I discovered when I analyzed 1,000+ investment opportunities a year whilst I was an investor at Octopus that most founders completely miss. Because here's the truth. When investors push back or challenge your assumptions, the stakes couldn't be higher. But here's what's fascinating. I can predict with 90% accuracy with the founders I work with which founders will get funded just by watching how they handle the first challenging question they get. And if you've ever raised funding, you know exactly the types of questions I'm talking about. Those gotcha questions investors love to ask. Questions that are hard to answer, sometimes even impossible, because they've built an incorrect assumption or misunderstanding of your market. Why can't Google just do this? What's stopping Amazon from copying your idea tomorrow? Surely customers won't pay for this, right? Aren't you in a really competitive industry? All of these kind of questions that you've probably got that you just don't believe in. And these questions aren't just frustrating. They instantly put you on the defensive. And your instinct is to push back, to explain why they're wrong. But the moment you get defensive, the entire tone of the conversation shifts. Instead of showcasing your expertise, you're stuck justifying yourself. And that's exactly where you don't want to be. But quickly, if you want to learn how investors make decisions, I've collected 250 investment memos from investors like Sequoia, A16Z, and even my internal investment memo that we used at my VC fund. It's a great way to get into the mind of an investor and how they make decisions on whether they want to invest into you. So check the link below to get it, and you'll get free access to all of those. But back to this process of answering the harder questions that an investor is going to ask you. I've seen founders go from confident to crumbling in seconds, launching into complicated explanations, and you know exactly how investors react. You've probably seen it. They'll nod politely to you, but mentally they're already checked out. And your funding opportunity slips away, and you're probably left wondering what went wrong. And you only have one chance with an investor. You can't mess it up. So that's why you need a simple, repeatable way to handle even the toughest investor questions. And it's this powerful 3-step formula that immediately turns skepticism into genuine excitement. And the best part, it's incredibly easy to learn and use in your very next investor conversation, and will completely change the way in which you answer investor questions, especially these tough ones. In fact, I'm about to show you exactly what Keith did differently to flip a skeptical investor into an enthusiastic supporter, step by step. And the founders who master the system, they don't just get funded, because you have more and more people who actually want to invest into you. And it all starts with the critical first step that almost every founder gets wrong. The first step of this formula might surprise you because it goes against most founders' natural instincts. Think about it like this. Imagine you're driving and someone cuts you off in traffic. Your instinct is to get angry, right? But imagine if the other driver immediately waved apologetically. Suddenly, your anger disappears. And that's exactly what agreeing first does. It diffuses tension and opens the door for a productive conversation. So when an investor challenges your idea, your first reaction is probably to defend yourself, to tell them why you're right, because you have to make them know you're right. You instantly want to explain why they're wrong. But here's the thing. The moment you become defensive, investors immediately sense weakness or uncertainty. Instead, you're going to do something totally unexpected and incredibly powerful. You're going to agree with them. Now, I know that sounds weird to you, but this simple act of agreement instantly lowers the investor's defenses. And that's exactly what Keith did when investors started asking him, but why can't Google just copy your idea tomorrow? That was one of the most common questions he kept getting asked. Now, I don't mean you're going to say they're completely right and you're completely wrong. Obviously, that would just be a failure. Instead, you're going to calmly validate their perspective by saying something along these lines. You know what? Our initial thesis was exactly the same. And that's why we started doing X. What this shows to investors is that you're thoughtful, you're open-minded, you're confident enough to acknowledge their viewpoint, and that you've done the work to get to your own conclusions. It strokes their ego that they're thinking about this industry exactly like you would, who is an expert. But this is where you can start to add your own unique insights about what you've done to see the world differently from their lens and from your expertise why you're doing things differently. And the thing is, once you've diffused their skepticism, you're perfectly positioned for step 2. So let's dive into exactly how to do that next. So once you've calmly agreed with the investor, you've immediately reduced the tension, but you can't stop there. Now you need to reset their perspective by clearly presenting data, facts, or a relatable story that shifts their thinking about the industry. Here's exactly how it works. After agreeing, you smoothly transition by saying something like this. When we did X, we discovered something fascinating. We actually learned why, and it completely changed our perspective of how we think about this industry. So I'll just go through an example of Keith could have said. The investors kept asking Keith, why can't Google just copy your idea tomorrow? So instead of getting defensive, Keith first calmly agreed. You know what? That's exactly what we thought of first too, which is why we spent time deeply researching this, especially around LLMs and what Google is focusing on in our space. Then he smoothly transitioned into his data and story. But here's what we found. Google actually tried something similar 2 years ago and it completely failed. Why? Because customers in this market deeply value personalized support and niche expertise, something large companies like Google simply can't scale effectively. In fact, when we tested our personalization approach, our customer retention jumped up by 250%. Now, I made it very generic and I put some numbers in there that weren't necessarily correct, just because Keith doesn't want me to say exactly what happened, right? But see what just happened. Instead of defending himself, Keith clearly shifted the investor's perspective by using concrete facts and a clear example. He demonstrated his expertise without being defensive, and he reset the frame completely. This simple step positions you as the expert, not someone scrambling to justify yourself. And investors quickly realize you've done your homework. You know something they don't, and they instantly become curious to learn more. And now that you've reset their thinking, you're perfectly positioned for that final step, clearly showing them why your way is better. So let's dive exactly into how to do that next, which rounds out the answer and makes it end in the best way possible. So step 3, imagine you're buying a car. The salesman tells you this one costs 10K more than the others. You ask why, and he just says, trust me, bro, it's better. You walk away, right? That's what happens when founders stop at we're different and forget to explain why their approach is worth the premium. So now that you've agreed with the investor and you've reset their perspective with data, facts, or a compelling story, it's time for the final step, which is clearly showing them why your approach is better. Now, this step is critical because investors don't just want to hear you're different. They want to hear that your difference matters. They want to see clearly why your approach will lead to better results. So here's exactly how you do it. After you reset the frame, confidently show them why your new direction is superior by clearly stating something. That's exactly why we're doubling down on X. And here's why it will work better for us. And then you can insert everything else that you need to show them that you're in a much better way. So let's continue with our earlier example about Google. So after explaining why Google's attempts failed, Keith confidently finished with something like this. That's why we're focused on personalized service and niche expertise. Already, our customers are sticking around 3 times longer, spending 50% more, and referring their friends. These are results that Google or any big player simply can't replicate right now, and it's because their strategy doesn't suit this type of customer and what they're really looking for. Notice what Keith did there? He didn't just say, we're better. He proved it with specific metrics that directly connected to his strategic insight. He moved from defense to offense, from uncertainty to clarity, whilst keeping the investors on side. Now, suddenly investors aren't skeptical. They're intrigued, excited, and ready to hear more because they see you as an expert in your field. This is how you turn these hard, sometimes unanswerable questions into your own superpower. So let's actually put this all together and really what that looks like, because now we can quickly talk about how you could start using this formula immediately in your next investor meeting. Because this simple, powerful 3-step formula will completely transform how you handle tough investor questions. And here's what makes it so powerful. It turns every tough investor question into a demonstration of your expertise. So when investors start challenging you, you're not scrambling to defend, you're showcasing exactly the kind of strategic thinking that they want to fund. And you'll have much, much better conversations from it. And remember, next time an investor challenges you, don't panic or get defensive. Instead, calmly agree with their perspective to instantly lower defenses, like that apologetic wave in traffic that melts your anger. Clearly reset their thinking by sharing compelling data, facts, or stories that shift their perspective. Constantly show them exactly why your approach works better, backed by proof. Don't be the car salesman who just says, trust me. And if you do this, you'll turn those gotcha questions into golden opportunities to showcase your expertise and vision. You'll be excited to have those questions and actually answer them. And investors won't just respect your answers, they'll trust your leadership and confidence. Now, I want you to try this in your next investor conversation and let me know in the comments what's the toughest question you've faced before and how would you answer it now using this 3-step formula. Otherwise, if you want to find out how investors actually signal to you that they're interested, then you can check out this next video where I'll show you the exact 6 signals investors look for and show that they want to invest.